Today I want to finally talk about ETHGate. Um, I haven't ever really talked about this a whole lot, just because I've been of the opinion that the courts and the government and the SEC and all of the other three-letter agencies in the country don't necessarily want the US to be able to expand in crypto until they can figure out a way to get a cut. And with all of the developments with ETHGate, I'd say over the last 2 weeks now, I wanted to go far into it in a way that you probably haven't seen before, and I'm going to tie it into a lot of things that Ripple and Stellar have been up to as well, because I think there's some very interesting connections there. So this might end up as a long one. I might chop it in half if I have to, but I wanted to expand upon this because I think it's a great illustration that it's not necessary, or it might not only be that the U.S. institution wants its cut, but there may be some individual cuts as well. So, without further ado, the final black swan event might be the downfall of Ethereum. That would certainly mess up a lot in the crypto space for a long time. But I do think the final one would be the fall of Tether, because that is what is heavily propping up a lot of Bitcoin right now. Okay, and then we have from Mr. Intuitive, the time has come. Hashtag ETHGate was trending just about a week and a half ago, and that is a good introduction. So, in short, this is all kicked off again because this Mr. Nerayoff guy came out and said that he's basically been working in the background for the last 4 years against Ethereum in a very legal way, because he was involved at the start and he knows what happened, and he knows that it is corrupt as hell. Not only with Ethereum, but with the SEC, and there's a lot of ties to China as well, which we will expand upon all those here. But he specifically calls out Bill Hinman as well, who is the one who did the quote unquote Ethereum free pass speech, which he essentially just said Ethereum is now decentralized enough where it just isn't important anymore, so they won't check into it. But if you look down here from Ashley Prosper, his post at the very bottom said, "Treasonists to me, crypto, and the country." Now, I thought that was really interesting because I have also found some ties to China, and we all know that China has a lot of cash and they have a very large influence over the economy here in America and in a lot of other areas of the world too. But they have gotten especially entrenched within a number of areas of the government and things related to it. So that's extremely interesting. All right, so this tweet isn't important. I used to follow Alex Cobb. He's really clickbaity, and I think that it's obnoxious. He has a lot of information on things, but yeah, I just can't do it. But I think the important thing is this tweet here, under an agreement of confidentiality, Nerayoff showed me proof of his claim, which involved emails with as high up as the ETH chain of command as you get. At some point, I hope to have him on Crypto Law US. I think this is John Deaton's account. But here he says, I have the map. So map got me thinking of another thing I had seen lately from Truth Labs, who has a lot of really interesting content, and I'll follow him or them actually. But this is the beginning of Ethereum, essentially, right? So if you go back to the beginning of some things, you can see some really interesting names. There's Vitalik's name on here somewhere. Yeah, here, Vitalik.eth. You've got Consensus. You've got, man, I can't pronounce it, but Wang Xiang. I don't know. And you have more Consensus. So this was essentially the very beginning of the distribution of Ethereum. And I think that my big point here is that you have these Chinese names which tie back into the treasonist comment as well. So it turns out a little bit more about this guy. He thought that he would help create a better world with Ethereum, and they paid him back by trying to toss him in jail from some help from their three letter friends, which one of the big ones is the SEC. Apparently he got tossed in a van with the FBI at some point too. So that's kind of what you get when you go against who's in charge. All right. So the point here that I wanted to make is that to put the size of this into perspective, back in 2007, 2008, Bernie Madoff's big scheme and scam was about 64.8 billion. Ethereum's ecosystem market cap today is close to 648 billion, which would mean about 10 times of that. And if it's as corrupt as it appears it is, which I have thought for a very long time, then the magnitude of this is much, much larger than things that our general economy has ever seen. So let's go back to the free pass, right? Here, from the digital asset investor, he has a email meeting invite from March of 2018, which was when the whole Ethereum free pass speech happened, right? And if you look at who's involved, you see some people from Andreessen Horowitz and Perkins Coie, who are two major law firms that work with high-level people in the U.S. Government, among a lot of other higher-ups. But again, he followed up to this and says, "Oh, the state shall live in infamy. Wait until you see what else happened this day to silence me and cover up their sins. They're hiding more than the motives behind that speech." Again, it just sounds horrible, doesn't it? So, tying this back to China, so who represented the two Chinese companies with the most blockchain patents in the world? Yes, William Hinman and Jay Clayton. Jay Clayton was the chair of the SEC that dropped the lawsuit on Ripple about XRP right before he went out, and then Hinman is the one who was in before him with all of this Ethereum stuff. So it says China accounts for 84% of all blockchain patent applications, and we are obviously falling very far behind on that. But at this point, it's not because I think that they're just incompetent and they want to figure out a systemic way to take their cut of the success of crypto in America. But now I think it is because they were receiving personal cuts. And that is just my thought. I am not saying that, so don't toss me in a van, FBI. Okay, so this is talking about China and the SEC. Why is the SEC chairman meeting with him at all? Never mind every month and twice in April about China. How much does Hank and his former Goldman colleagues have invested in China? So, again, just think things are tying together pretty interestingly as far as personal cuts of Ethereum that Chinese organizations were heavily involved with at the very start in that ICO. So here we're back to Truth Labs. Currently, he has traced 1,890 of the first 2,000 Ethereum blocks. 93% of those mined are all directly tied to Wang Xiang, Ethereum's largest ICO contributor. All right. So here we have a idea of the scale: 560,000 ETH, 530,000 ETH, 450,000 ETH, and 436,000 ETH. That's just insane. So here we're talking about some Chinese and Asian influence again. I'm making some connections here, and I will wrap it up here in a bit. But it is an example of CZ over at Binance trying to portray that he's one of the good guys, right? But I found it interesting that HTX was exploited for 5,000 ETH in light of all of this ETHGate stuff, in light of a couple of other things that I will talk about here. But again, it just doesn't look right. Here we have a little bit more ETH action from JP Morgan as well. They sold 44 million ETH, but please consider something which is very important with ETH sales. They don't sell ETH, and they certainly don't dump it. They only decentralize their holdings for us, and I hope that's obvious sarcasm, but yeah, that's interesting. And but that came about from this tweet down here saying that the Ethereum co-founder transferred 41 million in ETH to an address on an exchange. I mean, again, guys, it's not right. So here's a comment from JP Morgan saying that the transition from proof of work to POS isn't really working for them. The transactions have gone down. The activity or the active addresses have gone down, and the total value locked on that network is down as well. So again, this just, it doesn't make sense. Are they just trying to cash out, and they're trying to cover it up with some news article that's just a cover story? I mean, why would they sell that much? Okay, so I think I made all of my China ties, right? I think we tied all of that together. What was it? 93% of the original ETH went to that Wang Xiang or whatever it was. And they've been talking with China a lot. Vitalik is tied to China. I found a couple of other tweets that were talking about the Chinese Communist Party ties to Vitalik as well, but I can't find it anymore. But yes, it's out there at least. So now let's move into some SEC stuff. Why did the case actually happen? Well, it was all about the SEC's made up interpretation of the Howey test, which is from what, the 1940s or something. and it was how to determine if something is a security. And this whole thing with XRP is that they were saying that the initial and the secondary sales of XRP itself were securities because it included some kind of an investment contract, which is one person understanding that they're buying or invested in something that will increase in value purely off of the work of someone else, which obviously is not true. XRP is an asset. XRP is a product that did never make sense in my mind, and I think it didn't make sense in a lot of others' minds, but the head people at the SEC were obviously interested in other things. So that part is agency created law, which an agency cannot create a law. Agency can create a lot of things that can look and feel like a law, but it's not law. And how exactly did Ethereum say that? Blah, blah, blah. Is it possible that some people knew it wasn't valid, but still went out and said it? One would almost think that Bill Hinman, Mark Berger, and even Jay Clayton were sent to the SEC for this very purpose, joined by career folks like all of these names, I'm assuming big finance, right? We expand this. Now that we've had multiple crypto lawsuits and decisions not go in the SEC's favor, can any attorneys point to a judge in any of them discussing the fifth prong of the Howey test created by Bill Hinman that to this day has the SEC ignoring Bitcoin and Ethereum? Well, that's because that fifth prong, it doesn't exist. There's no such thing as agency created law. Okay, man. So this is interesting because with FTX, a judge has ruled that FTX will have to sell off everything that it had, which includes Bitcoin, ETH, some XRP, some Sol, and I think a lot of other things, but I think those were probably some of the larger percentages of their holdings. So again, we're talking about trying to sell ETH. I don't think that this is as conspiratorial. I think we all understand this, but it's just weird. But I think the important point thing here is that if a federal judge is authorizing the sale of certain assets like Sol and XRP back into the secondary market, those sales must be legal and exempt from SEC registration requirements, meaning they're not considered securities. So what he's saying here is that if XRP was sold off of an exchange, then that shouldn't have been a security either, and XRP will be sold off of an exchange now. So it is just another point that XRP itself and probably not a lot of other assets out there are actually securities. Okay, so now we are calling the SEC a tactical unit of the establishment, which is absolutely right. I think Gary Gensler is an intelligent guy, but he got put in this spot to be in a very tight spot. He'll ultimately end up as a fall guy, in my opinion. He'll probably earn a lot out of that, and he'll be very comfortable until he finally ends up in the ground. But he's a joke. He knows what he says is a joke, but he just has to say it. So he says that the crypto space is full of a bunch of scams. And he's asked, would anything a court says change your mind? And he says, well, no. So we have a U.S. government employee saying that anything out of a court won't change his mind and his interpretation and the actions that he wants to actually take. So how is he being incentivized in all of this? What does he get out of this? Well, I don't know. I can assume a couple of things, but I don't know. Okay, so now we have more people involved in why did XRP originally even get taken off? Well, Cowboy Crypto. After delisting XRP, Coinbase invested in Saffron Finance in 2021 with this guy who is the CoinMarketCap founder, along with Multicoin Capital founder, who openly shorted and badmouthed XRP. CoinMarketCap FUDs XRP in 2022 and is owned by Binance as well, which we talked about earlier. It's just another really interesting connection back to China. And then Coinbase would invest in Consensus in November of 21, which is very closely intertwined with Ethereum as well. Now here's where we get into the XRP and XLM thing, in my opinion. So we've got this tweet from XX. Peter Thiel plays both sides. And this comes from a tweet from Huber. How Consensus Ethereum money laundering works. Consensus funds a project that they can control and writes a grant for a DAO. That project is established, but it does not work. Then Joseph Lubin and Vitalik give extra money to that DAO to launder the money back to their companies by providing services to their projects or getting them to issue grants to their own projects and front companies. Joseph Lubin is famous for disguising himself while always keeping a majority of holdings in all of the projects he funds. So now we're back on Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel and Palantir's law firm offered Hinman to pay for his expenses in exchange for a closed group private meeting. Hinman said this is something that he, the SEC, wants to do. So we have Peter Thiel in here again. Let's tie that back into that PayPal Mafia video I did, which I'll include in the description here. So if you remember that email that was about a call, Andreessen Horowitz is one of Ripple's early angel round funders. So if Andreessen Horowitz is involved in the ETHGate stuff and they're working against Ripple, why would they have been one of their early investors as well? That makes it sound like it was all a part of a game in order to possibly suppress the price of XRP, so the elites and a lot of powerful institutions out there could acquire XRP before it became expensive, and Ripple, the company, might have possibly been in on that and went along with that. Now that right there is wild conjecture, but these ties are just really interesting. So, and Coinbase and Goldman are very tied to Ripple as well. Goldman especially, not only as an investor, but with employees. Coinbase Ripple delisting was not what you think. Same with the two SEC cases with Ripple, XRP, and Coinbase, where the SEC is essentially saying that all kinds of things are securities now. Too many coincidences with the same people and companies. Now we have One River Asset Management and Jay Clayton to add to that list as well. What bug did, Anyway, so Jay Clayton's wife worked for Goldman Sachs. Gary Gensler worked for Goldman Sachs as well. I mean, I am truly beginning to think it's not just a corrupt U.S. government thing at this point, but we've also got the people within it and the elites who they know one way or another, possibly receiving some kind of personal incentives out of all of this. And let's go back and tie XRP, XLM, and ETH together in a different way. XRP, XLM, and ETH are all involved one way or another with the World Economic Forum as well. There are very many high potential and very well connected projects associated with them. We've got XRP, HBAR, Casper, XLM, Quant, AVAX, Sol, Ethereum, or the energy web token, Algo. It just, you can't tell me that these people are actively working against each other. I think is my point on that. And why might they be working against each other, at least in public? Well, I talked about this yesterday, but this is from a conference in 2023 as well, where they were openly acknowledging and admitting even that Ripple and possibly XRP itself would have a very significant cross-border trade. I'm just drawing a blank. A cross-border trade presence between central banks. So if these institutions had to acquire XRP at market prices, then that price would very quickly increase exponentially. So maybe this whole thing was just to suppress the price of XRP so that everyone who really needed it could acquire it cheap now. So again, XLM and XRP, they're primarily in these cross-border payments things with developing countries who would probably be more subservient to something like a CBDC, because if they're able to access more money, they would they might go along with it easier than something like the US or the UK, for example. So I guess to wrap this up, let's talk about what might come out of it. It is increasingly very likely that the US government will shut down at midnight on September 30th. There have been some updates. I think the Senate has some kind of a preliminary temporary agreement to avoid a shutdown. I'm expecting that. I think it will happen most times because all of them at the end of the day play for the exact same side, no matter if they're D's or R's. Here's that tweet. I thought I lost that earlier, but I'll always jump on another excuse to say that Gary Gensler is a weasel. So yeah, there you go. But to talk about the SEC again, the first Bitcoin ETF could be coming as soon as court rules in favor of Grayscale over SEC. This is from almost a month ago. And the SEC has been dragging its feet on ETFs after they got told that they can't deny them, essentially. So they are dragging their feet. The ARK Invest and 21 shares Bitcoin ETF filings were delayed. Those weren't due until November 11th. And we have another one, Global X ETFs, was due October 7th. So they're just dragging their feet, trying to figure out a way to get more of a cut out of the success of crypto. And I guess to wrap this whole thing up, we have a bipartisan letter from Congress that was sent to Gary Gensler at the SEC urging them to approve a Bitcoin spot ETF. This very likely won't change anything. It's probably posturing, but it just again illustrates how the SEC is just corrupt as hell. So I know that went long, but I think it's really important to connect everything, especially Ethereum, China, Ripple, XRP, XLM, Coinbase, JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs and Peter Thiel with the PayPal mafia, because the PayPal mafia is also behind XRP and XLM as well. So at this point, I just think the elite individuals are using the U.S. Government to find a way to get paid, and I think that's, unfortunately, I don't think there's more of an explanation than that.